pass it over.
Good to see so many here, in spite of the threat of thunderstorms this morning. I'm sure we owe our beautiful weather to Anasava, who, instead of meditating last night, prayed all night long that it wouldn't rain. Apparently her prayers were answered. It's always good to come back to this place. For you old timers, this place brings back fun memories. So much of the Dharma was spoken here that you are now able to read in the form of literature, books, so forth and so on. So today we will simply continue where we left off some 3 years or so ago. But before that, I thought we will take care of first things first. And I am so happy to see my sister, Tony G, here today. Somebody bring her here. You will.
Very close.
And those of you who are familiar know that at some stage in everybody's life, there has to be a line drawn. A line that demarcates a turning point, a point of transformation, where the individual has come to realize the inherent failure of their way of being in the world. A point where a person finally realizes that their ego project has failed to deliver happiness in any real sense of the word. Reaching that point, the person becomes committed to the alternative way of life that is sannyas, that is spiritual development. Becoming a new being, in fact. And it has always been the case in every great tradition that at such a turning point, because the person has become a new being, the person is given a new name to mark that occasion. And though Tony G is not new to the house, she certainly is new to some of you. So I should say a few things about her. She won't talk much about herself. That is the kind of person she is. She's much more willing to allow people to draw their own conclusions about her. While she simply rests in knowing who she is. And those of you who have not known her over the years as I have, and some of the other folks here have, will not take long to discover that Tony has a very sweet way about herself. That is characterized by a kind of pervasive friendliness. Tony G is a good friend. Paravaka G, you know that. She's been your friend for 20 years. And she's a good friend, isn't she? And both of us have seen her demonstrate that friendship over and over and over. It is that aspect of her divinity that was able to break through the barriers of her ego and manifest in her life. Something of the God flavor that could not be interrupted and obscured and blocked out. And it came through, and we are grateful unto it. And she has practiced this unconditional friendliness all of her life. Even when you wasn't seeing her around here, every year, Tony G would send birthday cards to Bilal and myself. She has always done her miti seva, whether she was here or not. Always in the background, supporting the work that is being done here. So you mustn't misinterpret her physical absence over these years. She has not been absent in spirit, and she has not been absent in seva. And I thought I'd better tell you about it, so that you don't come to some kind of wrong conclusion about this woman. She will be your friend. And she will be your friend unconditionally. That is her siddhi. That is her gift. And that is what I call her to demonstrate. Most radically now. To let this impulse toward being friendly become the dominant mode from which you function. I have watched you, beloved, nurse a man on his deathbed. And you didn't have to do that, did you? As you all know, there is a training scheduled in September for those of you who wish to do seva with the dying in the form of hospice care, who will be willing to go into nursing homes, so forth and so on, and share your friendship with the dying and the sick. This woman is years ahead of you and brought a dying man into a home, nursed him, fed him until death. That's friendship being demonstrated at the most radical level. It is a human quality that we all possess. It is inherent in our nature. Most of us are so bogged down in our own ego projects that we never find an opportunity to let that divine aspect of our being break through and flow into our relationship with other human beings. And Tony, you have been blessed in that respect. That God did not take your friendliness from you, and you have been able to live on that basis. And it has been a basis of great joy. Have you enjoyed being this woman's friend? Yes. You have found that the only time you were happy is when you were being unconditionally friendly toward other human beings. Is that right, beloved? And the moment you stepped out of that posture is when you have suffered. Is it not? Stay in that posture, for that is the secret of your happiness. And God will not abandon you and will send you some friendship too. In Sanskrit, there's a word for this kind of way of being that is unconditional friendship demonstrated within the context of your relationship with other human beings. In Sanskrit, it has been called matri. Matri means the capacity and the demonstration of unconditional friendship. I'm not talking about the kind of friendship that you all are practicing, where there are all kinds of conditions that you place upon it. First, now you will be somebody's friend and you will be friendly toward them if, and only if, they meet certain standards and criteria that you have set forth. And almost always that criteria is in the service of your own ego and your own ambitions. Now, if they treat me right, I will demonstrate my friendship. But if they should treat me wrong, if they should offend me, then you withdraw your friendliness. Some of you who are members of the Gurumukha Samiti Order of the House of Ra are wearing these kustis. These kustis are supposed to symbolize your commitment to the unconditional demonstration of friendliness toward all sentient beings. The most ultimate sign of spiritual growth is the ability to demonstrate unconditional friendliness toward all sentient beings. And this ability to demonstrate unconditional friendship and friendliness, what the Buddhists have called loving kindness toward all sentient beings, is what this word Maitri means. So today, beloved, you have earned the title, Maitri Ji Ra Afrika, the one that we can count on for the demonstration of unconditional friendliness and loving kindness. A true refuge for all of us. Worship. Thank you. We are in an informal place, so of course we can be very informal today. So simply relax, take your shoes off, kick back, as we say in the hood, and let us enjoy each other's company today. Enjoy this beautiful place that we're in. And be friends with each other today. To become a refuge for each other. A cool breeze on a hot day for each other. You see, beloved, you cannot become Maitri by simply reading books. By simply talking about it. There's a very real ordeal required for that. A real transcendence of one ego is necessary for that. You see, very often when we come to a spiritual path and we start receiving Dharma and spiritual teachings, instead of being transformed by that Dharma and those teachings, we tend to co-opt those teachings and put them in the service of our ego project. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
You remain involved in the same old bullshit that you were involved in prior to even hearing Dharma. You simply co-opt the Dharma and the teachings to serve you in your ambitions, to fulfill your own ego aims, goals, and objectives. You try to use the Dharma and the teachings and the practices associated with the Great Way as a mean of avoiding doing the real work that is necessary on yourself as a human being. Maharaji said, first order of business on the path is that you must become a first-class human being. How will you become a mystic? How would you become a saint? How will you become spiritual? And all of that stuff if you have not first become a good human being. And very often all that you do when you come to this path, you see, is you start thinking that by hearing a few teachings and learning a little jargon and doing a little yoga, that you are liberated from and excused from the very real and necessary ordeal of working on making yourself into a first-class human being. You try to bypass the necessity of personal development to the point of becoming a good human being. Are you following me? Now that you know a little Dhamma, you do a little yoga, you think it's not necessary for you to work on your anger, that it's not necessary for you to work on your greed, that it is not necessary for you to work on your out-of-control vanity and arrogance, that it is not necessary for you to overcome all of your petty impulses that is associated with your attachment, so forth and so on. You think by getting up and doing a little of what you think is yoga and meditation, that you are excused from the ordeal of really dealing with the process of being transformed into a good human being. You do not wish to live the Dhamma, and you do not wish to have your life and living transformed by this Dhamma. Oh, Bhagwan, I will go to satsang, I'll do a little meditation in the morning, so forth and so on, and voila, and I will become a good human being. I need not work on it. Beloveds, that is not the way that I am here to offer you. The spiritual process starts at the personal level. You must first become a good human being, personal. And you must be able to then demonstrate that goodness within the context of your relationship with other people. You must become competent at the interpersonal level of your life and living. And until those two stages are dealt with, you cannot enter into the transpersonal dimensions that is spiritual development proper. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is the work that has to be done. And there is a tendency in all of us, so I'm not mocking you. There's a tendency in all of us to try to spiritually bypass the very real ordeal that confronts us when we come to a path, which is to become a functionally good human being. To become good to your wife, good to your husband, good to your children, good to your friends, good to your neighbors, good to people. That is necessary work. That has to be done. You have to get straight in all of those areas. You cannot simply repeat a few mantras for a few hours a day and bypass the real ordeal of becoming a first-class human being. When I first heard about the teachings of Dhamma, that is what excited me most, was the prospect, at least in my mind, that I can simply get initiated by a guru, do my meditation, and I won't have to make a living because I'll become enlightened. You see, I don't need no damn money. I'll become enlightened. So that's all the task of earning a livelihood. Are you following me? I was able to avoid the sadhana of making a living, and you must make a living. You must do that sadhana. That's necessary. And many of you here do not wish to do the sadhana of livelihood. You must handle that business. You must get it straight, get a job, make a living, move from the useless side of life, cease being parasitical and dependent upon others to meet your physical needs. Handle that business, get it straight. The path takes what it takes, and it takes that from the beginning. When you come through the door, those are the minimum demands that are put on you. Isn't that right? Haven't I said so? Long before you apply for initiation, didn't I tell you, go get straight? You got to get straight. But like you, I also felt that I had found a way around getting straight. I had found an alternative to dealing with the tasks of life. I didn't have to worry about getting a wife. Hell, I'm going to be enlightened in 6 months, I figured. There's no point in going through this whole ordeal. What would I need with a wife? On the side, I thought I would be enlightened, you know. Read all the books. I'm full of enthusiasm, right? I'm willing to meditate regularly and function and so forth. I should be enlightened, set around a year or so. There's no need for me to get involved in this business of getting a wife and a job and so forth and so on. That's for non-spiritual people. That's for people who are not on the path. They need to be worried about all of that, not me. You see? And I realized I had some problems with my anger, with my lust, with my greed, with my attachment and so forth and so on. I had some sense of my shadow and my weak side and all of that other stuff. But Rataji, I thought I need not work on that. Right? I need not try to deal with the very real personal deficits and so forth. I knew I was an asshole, but I figured that just by meditating, that I wouldn't have to deal with that. I wouldn't have to become moral. I wouldn't have to become ethical. I wouldn't have to do none of that. Just do my bhajan and simran, and in 6 months, I would transcend all of that. Well, I in for a shock, beloved. That's not how the path works. Maharaji made it clear. Go handle that human work. Get straight. Get straight. I didn't want to go to college being a young man, because what was the point? Right? You have to understand, I'm 21, I'm initiated, I got none. What I need to go to college for? And it didn't make sense to me. And Maharaji had to remind me, look, go finish your education. Go get married. What he was saying, in effect, go handle your business. Get straight as an individual. Get your personal shit together. Then come to me. You have to have a foundation. Without a foundation, how can you raise this edifice? And it doesn't just end with getting straight on a personal level, working with your stuff. Now you must demonstrate that within the context of your relationship with other human beings. You must become matri. Now you all hear the anger dharma. Some of you teach the anger dharma. But when you get angry, you cannot implement one iota of it. You call me, oh, Bhagwan, I'm angry. I say, okay, well, forgive him. Use the technique. Oh, I can't forgive him. I can't forgive him. What is this nonsense? What do you think the aim of the anger dharma is for? It's to implement. It is to use that within the context of your relationships. That's what it's for. It is not something to simply kick back and appreciate from a blackboard somewhere or a book. Spiritual insights, beloveds, are useless unless you can actualize them and integrate them into your day-to-day living. And within the context of your relationship with other human beings, especially intimate relationships, your family, your friends, your wife, your children, your neighbors, so forth and so on. And even more radically so within the case of your fellow disciples. There should be so much tenderness among you. So much. The flow of loving kindness and the demonstration of unconditional friendship amongst you should be so thick that we can cut it with a knife. It is the first thing that people should notice about you. Shouldn't they? That is the advantage of being a part of a sangha, a community of fellow seekers. You get to practice the Dharma. And when you have practiced that Dharma to the point that you can Dharmatize your life and living, then truly you become a refuge for others. Until then, you're just a pain in the ass for other people. You hardly a refuge for anybody. So you must see the fallacy, beloveds, of trying to bypass the spiritual ordeal, the real process, because you cannot bypass it. As long as your motive is to bypass the very real ordeal that is spiritual development, you will simply always co-opt and misuse these sublime teachings to cover up what is only your ordinary impulse to fulfill your own ego ambitions. You use the teachings as a way to defend yourself from the tasks of life. Now, instead of dealing with the very real task of relationship, finding a wife or husband or some intimate other in your life, you use the teachings on detachment as a means to cover up your personal inability to make relationship with another human being. That's all that's about. That's not no detachment. You're using the argument of detachment to cover up an inherent deficit in you. That's all you're doing. That's not detachment. That's co-opting the teachings to rationalize your failure at the personal level of development. That's all that's about, isn't it? This is to make wrong use of the Dharma, wrong use of the teachings. You must truly enter into the sadhana that is associated with the personal level of your development. You must handle all that business. And you must get it straight. The path takes what it takes, beloved. And this is what it takes. And we must simply become willing, capable of unconditional demonstration of friendliness and loving kindness toward our intimate others and all sentient beings. We must dharmatize our life and living. We must let the inherent goodness that lies at the core of our being flow through the vehicle of our personalities. We must incarnate that which is divine in us fully and manifest it in our life and living. We must abandon this whole effort to bypass the process and get down to the real business. Something to say about it? You're most welcome. We're informal today.
You know about, you mentioned hospice. Is there a hospice movement? You have,
Of course, you see, beloved, in America in general,
I mean,
but as you mean in terms of the House of Ra?
right.
Acha. One of the concepts in the House of Ra, beloved, is that we have to do seva. Seva means rendering service to other human beings. Seva is a way of us doing something with our body, with our wealth, with our intellects and minds on behalf of other people. And one of the arenas in which we try to do seva is seva with those who are terminally ill. We find, beloved, that most people simply have no ability to die good deaths because they have lived their whole life in denial about the reality of their death and dying, and therefore are very unprepared. And that the suffering that they encounter at the time of their death and dying is immense. And one of the kindest actions that any human being can take in the service of another human being is to help them be relieved of some of that suffering.
Right. I'm an RN, and the reason I ask is because if there's somewhere I can volunteer, this is something I would do. I would like to do.
Good.
But I just want to know.
Sure.
You know, how
Ung Saab, where are you at, Ung Saab? See this gentleman? Stand up, Ung Saab. See that gentleman back there? See him afterward, beloved? We'll more than be happy to have you with us. There will be a training in September so that you can become certified, and we will welcome you. Something else to say about it? Anything you would like. Otherwise, I'll sit here and go to sleep. I'm comfortable. Yes, beloved.
Yes, Bhagwan. I was thinking that in order to do the practice, you have to submit or surrender to the ideology. You have to love yourself. You cannot fool yourself into loving yourself. And in order to love yourself, you have to love everything and everyone. Because God pervades everything and everyone. And everything and everyone is just an extension of yourself. And you realize that perspective makes it seemingly easier.
In fact, you're certainly moving in the right direction, beloved. The ideal, however, is that you have to really accept everything that is true about yourself. Now, the reality, you see, beloved, is that there are aspects about each of us that we do not accept. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems. The basis of all psychological suffering is simply our refusal to accept the entirety of our experience. There are aspects of our experience, what in the East have been called your karma, your actual domain of personal experience. There are aspects of your experience that you don't like, that you dislike, that are painful for you, and you do not wish to accept them. Not wishing to accept those difficult aspects of your own experience, we contract from them. That is the fundamental activity of the ego. Ego is a contraction entity. It is a separation, a withdrawal. A withdrawal from what? It is a withdrawal from that aspect of your human experience that you don't like at the moment. Not only aspect of your human experience as it relates to objectivity, people, right? You don't like this person, right? And therefore you contract, but even subjectively. And it is in the subjective realm that you find those aspects of yourself that you don't like. What the Jungian psychologists have called your shadow. Now there's things about you, beloved, that you don't like. You don't like it about yourself. It is painful for you because those truths about yourself contradicts the identity that you created of yourself, the identity that you present to others for purposes of gaining their recognition, respect, praise, so forth and so on. And it is that aspect of yourself that you tend to suppress, that you withhold from, you try to hide away. You don't accept it. You won't let it be. Now the first step then that has to be taken when working on oneself at the personal level of development, you have to start accepting everything that is true about yourself and your experiences. Whether you like it or dislike it is not the point anymore. You simply must let your experience be. And you must accept it. So you must accept yourself, true. This accepting of yourself, this unconditional acceptance of yourself, is what you have been calling loving yourself. How can you love yourself when you have split off half of who you are? But you're really saying you love some things about yourself, and there's some things about yourself that you hate. So you're not loving your whole self. You see, it's a kind of partial thing. But true love, authentic self-love, is about accepting every aspect of yourself and every aspect of your experience. Every aspect of your experience. Rather than contracting from it, trying to defend yourself, you see, from the reality of the way things really are. What I have called the as-isness of life. And some aspects, beloved, of the suchness, the as-isness of life, you don't like. Now, you don't like being broke. But that is a part of your experience. You broke. Not liking it, you'll try to recoil from it. You'll contract. You'll go into denial. You'll come up with some kind of means of defending yourself against that part of your reality. So you may start practicing some kind of self-deception. Right? Well, I'm broke, yeah, but I'm going to win the lottery. You know, so you carry that ticket around all day, and you cling to that damn lottery ticket. Or you got some scheme, right, that you came up with, right? You got a book of schemes, in fact, right? And you got to stay in that scheming stage of mind, because if you stop scheming, you got to deal again with this aspect of your life and experience that is real. And you don't want to deal with that. Yes, beloved?
Yes, I'm sorry, Baba. You're absolutely right. What I was saying, okay, recognizing that one has to keep his attention on the fact that that is the case. I would think that that would be the case for the majority of us, so that you can take of seeing and be ready to let the real self emerge, because that will take time, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's quite an ordeal. And the work that we have to do at the personal level can take years. In fact, it can take a lifetime. It depends on how enthusiastic we are about that, and so forth and so on. The second part of your point, though, beloved, about loving other people, you see, that's the whole point of making salutations to each other, whether it is the namaste in the East or the ratshakam or the, you almost find always in every kind of spiritual community, there's a kind of gesture. The ancient Africans used to pat the heart, you know, they sending their love to each other. Well, that is really a gesture by which we are demonstrating our orientation to the goodness in other people. When we are trying to work on the interpersonal level of our life, becoming matri, you see, and all of that. The key is that you must orientate yourself toward the inherent goodness in that person. That's why we say rashekum. It means I am orientating myself way beyond your personality, right? Because you may be an asshole. Loving you has nothing to do with denying that you're an asshole. Loving you means that I'm able to reorientate the basis of my relationship with you on that in you, which is not an asshole, back to the very core of who you are, the inherent goodness in your being. And every human being, by definition, is inherently good, inherently divine. And every one of us are in the process of trying to differentiate that formless goodness and incarnate it into our life and living. Are you following me, beloved? So if I see this brother, and this brother is a straight up asshole, all that means is that he hasn't been able to find a way to activate and actualize the goodness that is inherent in him. It doesn't mean he's not good. And if I can stay focused there, right, then I can demonstrate, unconditionally demonstrate loving kindness and friendliness toward him. But it doesn't mean that I am not seeing where that person is at. Being loving toward others does not mean that you become some kind of a fool or some kind of Pollyanna. It's not about that. Quite the opposite. You're very clear about it. You see? It simply means that you're able to see deeper and to relate and base your relationship on that with that person on something much deeper and much more profound. And remaining conscious of the inherent goodness that is in every human being is what gives you the ability to practice that kind of unconditional friendship and loving kindness. And almost never on the basis of their personality. How can you do it on the basis of their personalities? Yes, beloved. Sure, that's spiritual bypassing, and that is co-opting teachings and using them in the service of your own ego defense against something unpleasant going on in your experience, which happen to be unsolved, you see, which always happen to be unsolved. So in your case, this should be easy. You only got one thing to work on. The rest of us, we got all kinds of things to worry about, huh? But rather than dealing with that, now, whatever is difficult, whatever is painful that is going on in your experience with Ansar, instead of fleeing it, instead of contracting from it, you see there are fundamentally 3 or 4 kinds of reactions that we will have to our experience that sets off the ego process. There's something that is in your experience that attracts you. That you figure you can make yourself feel better if you can have it, right? And that creates in us a tendency to grasp. We start trying to hold on, grasp it. And that has its own set of problems, doesn't it? Sure it does. Or there's something going on in your experience, more usually the case, there's something going on in your experience that you don't like. In fact, you are constantly monitoring and scanning your experience in search of that which is going on that you don't like. That is what you're doing all the time. What you're calling thinking is nothing more than your constant and compulsive and obsessive monitoring and scanning of your personal experiences in search of anything that you don't like that may go down and therefore disturb your so-called happiness. Or at least make you feel worse than you're already feeling. That's probably more accurate. So now you see, beloved, when you come across such an item, now the tendency is to avoid it, right? Now you calling this reaction that is avoidance detachment. That's not detachment, that's avoidance. That's not practicing Dharma. You see, that's using Dharma to rationalize the practice of your ego reactivity. That's all. You see, it's a cover-up. Instead of standing right there. And now accepting that experience. That's true. What is happening is going on is the part of your experience. Right? Now, move into it. Feel it. Get into it. And that's another matter. I am hoping, Bhakti Maji, that you and Guru Dasa, I hope where is Guru Dasa? Where is she at? She's not here? Acha, did you talk to Guru Dasa?
I talked to her last night.
Acha. So you and Guru Dasa hopefully will be doing a workshop where you all will be dealing with what I have called the Bhakti Dharma, right? And you will be dealing with this whole business about the practice of unconditional friendliness and loving kindness, right? And in that workshop that you and Guru Dasa will do, you will be addressing this very issue, won't you? But in response to your observation, beloved, it is when we encounter the negative and painful aspects of our personal experiences that very often trigger the reaction that is avoidance, rejection, so forth and so on. And then we use the Dharma to rationalize that kind of reactivity. And unless you stand there, you will not do what is necessary at the level of interpersonal relationships to deal with that situation, right? If there's conflict, that means that there's work to be done. That's what conflict is a sign of. That means you got to. There's some work to do here. You know, there's some business to be handled, right? And if you flee, you never handle that business, right? So rather than reduce your pain, you just added another layer of pain. You follow me? There's the pain that was there initially, right? Because he's still your husband, you see? Right? Now there's the pain of having to go all the way up to Indiana somewhere where you can't stay all night and have to go back again. That's another level of pain, right? I mean, you just added another pain. You have to stand right there. And you have to move into that. And meet it with great compassion. Meet it with great compassion, with great understanding. Go into it now. You see? Move into that experience. Deeply. Yes, beloved.
I think that's where, me personally, I fall short. When I go to meet it, the place where I go to meet it from is not compassion. It's to either make it right, make it wrong. You know
Yes.
what I'm saying? It's not a place that's going to have anything be resolved.
Right.
So, you know, even when I confront the issue, it's the place where we have a tendency to come from is not about fixing it, but just to make us feel better.
Yeah, it's to win.
To win.
To win. To get your way. Basically. You're absolutely right. It's more ego activity. That's all. That's all. To get justice. Right? To somehow be compensated. Right? Retribution, so forth and so on. That's not the way. We will talk more about that in the workshop on the psychology of enlightenment. When is it, Siddhanta? The 19th of August. All right, that Thurgood Marshall, right? So you all are most welcome. Because there's a real psychology and psychological process associated with the enlightenment experience. Somebody has something else to say about it? Something to discuss? Yes, beloved.
I shake them.
What I shake 'em, beloved?
What I understood you to say is that we should improve our life. Well, not improve, I hate to say that, but we should live our life by having a job, taking care of the regular mundane responsibilities. But what I want to know is, in making money and doing the things that you need to do to take care of your responsibilities, where does it begin and end with following an ego project to make money to satisfy the things that need to be satisfied in your life? What's the fine line? How do we know? These are necessities. These are things that that are required of us to do.
How do you not get bogged down in that? Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Acha. You see, the concept is what we call swarmatha. There's swarmath and there's parmath. There's the living of the worldly life and the living of the spiritual life. Now, the living of the worldly life, in the true sense of the word, is really taking care of all of that business that is necessary for the maintenance of this body and so forth and so on. It is doing that and those things in the world that are practical. Not doing those things in order to make yourself happy. Not doing those things as an alternative to real happiness, which is only available through a spiritual practice that we call paramattha. You follow me? What we normally do in the world is that we make the world a path. You make getting a wife, getting a husband, getting a job, buying a house, you make that into a path. You make it into a spiritual path. And you travel it and you get involved in it with the hopes and the expectation that at the end of all of that, you will find happiness. You will find fulfillment. You will find satisfaction. That is what characterizes the ego project. It is involved in the world with the hope, in the expectation that this involvement will result in outcome and happiness. And of course it does not. It does not. But you need a foundation because you're on the earth. You see? You're part of the earth. And you must be rooted here. You must have a foundation to build on. And practically speaking, you see, beloved, when you don't have any money, your relationship is all messed up. You are full of so much anxiety, you can't do any meditation. You can't concentrate the mind. How can you concentrate the mind? You're warped. You're full of so much depression, anxiety, confusion. That kind of mind cannot practice, by definition. So you have to handle all of those kinds of things. You have to take care of that money, food, sex, and all of that. Got to handle all that kind of business, you see. But not with the expectation that it will outcome in happiness. Paramatha, your spiritual practice, deals with that. You see, beloved, there is suffering. And this suffering can be approached from many different directions. Spiritual practice is a kind of approach toward resolving the problem of suffering that exists. Swamatha is also aimed at resolving the problem of suffering. But it is an approach that is predicated and based on the way that you are in the world, in the reality of all of that, you see. To be in the world in such a way that you do not contribute to your suffering is the function of Swarma. That is the right way to be in the world. You don't go on adding more and more and more. But you're absolutely right. You cannot get lost there. These things are preparation. But you have to handle that because you have to have a foundation, you see. Otherwise, there will be this tendency to bypass, right? That's what I was talking about. And you have to understand in these times that we're living, and especially among black folks, there's a great impulse and a great tendency to become involved in spiritual bypassing. Why? Because it is so very hard in these times that we're living in to really accomplish the tasks of life. It's hard to get a job where you make enough money to take care. I mean, that's hard. It's hard to find stable relationships and so forth. That's hard work. And most people are having a hard time doing that. And so when they come to the path, it's almost like a godsend. Because now they have a way of rationalizing and getting around the real tasks that they had previously failed at in the first place. Now they already have failed in their relationship. They have not for the life of them been able to develop any kind of stable, long-lasting relationship. They have failed. Now naturally the teachings is very appealing to that kind of person. Because now they think, well, I can meditate and take my attention inside and blah, 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 and I don't have to worry about it. You see? They're trying to bypass. They're co-opting. They're using the Dharma to rationalize and cover up their fundamental failures in the world, aren't they? And this is to then reduce this sublime teaching to mischief. Are you following me, beloved? So that is why the masters always say, you know, take care of that business so that you will make right use of the Dharma and that you will make right use of the Buddha and you will make right use of the path, that you will not misuse these things. And look upon them as a means to excuse yourself and exempt yourself from the real tasks of life and living, which is business you got to handle. And this is especially necessary for us as black people. Especially necessary. We'll use the path for all kinds of reasons, not just ways of avoiding in the world, you know, but even subjectively, to deal with your inferiority complexes. You see, you use the teachings as a way to make yourself feel special. You see, it becomes a part of your narcissistic defense system. Are you following me? Are you with me on this? It's a way of making yourself feel special, to give you some relief from your fundamental feeling of being inferior. Now, I'm a black man, and I ain't got no money, I ain't got no power, and blah, 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 but damn it, I'm a Radasi, and I'm spiritual. You are just simply now reduce the Dharma and the teachings to serve your own narcissistic defense mechanism, to protect yourself from the pain of your inferior social position. That is all. The path, the Dharma, is not about to make yourself feel special. There's nothing special about you. Every human being is made of the same stuff. That is God. Period. Very often you see, beloved, what happens when you begin to get involved in this spiritual bypassing business. Your own superego. You know what superego is? See Siddhanta. Where's Satra? Satra, where's Satra? Satra and Siddhanta is going to do workshop, and they're going to talk to you about the, you know, all of this Freudian stuff and the superego. But one of the things that happens, you see, is that the superego, this inner voice that is constantly criticizing you, the critical voice inside, now it starts punishing you for your deviation from the path. Because now it starts saying, oh my God, you know, I got to meditate more. Boy, I got to become more compassionate. I got to become more loving. You know, I got to get all these things, you know, so that I can feel like I have worth and value as a human being. They start making the path turn into a means of making themselves feel more worthwhile and valuable as a human being. You see? They co-opt it and put it into the service. And so they're more busy trying to perpetuate their own superegos right? Responding to that own critical voice inside than dealing with the business at hand. Are you following me, beloved? At least a little bit. And so, failing to do more meditation, to become more compassionate, they start hating themselves more. They hate themselves because they can't meditate. Now, isn't that something? What do that have to do with self-love? And what does that have to do with being on the path? If you're on a path and you hating yourself more, what kind of path are you on? You're not on this path. That's the point I'm making. Are you following me? If the Dharma and all of this is, and the way you are trying to work with the Dharma results in your hating yourself more, then you're not doing what you're being instructed to do. You are somehow using the path to further create this self-hatred in you. And you hated yourself even before you came to the path. That's the killer. The fault is not the path. You have always been doing that. You have always been finding some reason to hate yourself. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough education. I don't have enough this. You see? So you'll take the teachings, the practice, the Dhamma, the Avyasa, the sadhana, and you'll make them function in your whole effort to maintain your identity project. That's all. There's nothing that you can do on the path, if you're doing it rightly, that will result in you hating yourself. Self-hatred is not a part of the spiritual process. It's the opposite. And this is what must be realized. This is what must be seen. And this is what must be dealt with. No fooling, no kidding. The path is not about beating up on yourself. It's about accepting yourself as you are. With all of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. And not hating yourself because of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. And passing that self-hate off as devotion and enthusiasm for the path. It has nothing to do with the path. That's just self-hatred. That's all. And black folks have to be very conscious of that, very aware of that. So the spiritual bypassing is a real big thing, right? Hopefully something that's said today will help you begin to look at what you're doing that can be related to this spiritual bypassing and to make those corrections where necessary. Something else to say about it, beloved? Yes, beloved?
Just want to know This might be a kind of a baby question, but where does expansion fit with all this? Expansion.
What do you mean by expansion, beloved?
Expansion. Well, I know that expansion means to become become one with all life. You know, to raise our consciousness to feel just one with everything. That's birds, bees, fleas, and knowing that our minds are and our experiences are practically, for the most part, just one and the same. Some develop more than others. Are we to look to continually expand consciously or work at expansion? I know contraction is a reaction to negative events, through my experiences or through my understanding of the House of God. But is expansion, is that something that we need to, does that come out as a result of meditation?
Acha. I'm not sure if I understand you fully, but certainly, beloved, the ultimate condition is one of oneness. A kind of oneness with one's experience. Remember, I have said that you're having an experience, aren't you? And there are parts of that experience that you're not one with, that you are contracting against, that you're trying to avoid, that you're not present with. There is an unconditional presence. Perhaps Patru Rinpoche, one of the great Tibetan lamas, gurus, said it best. And the precious Guru says that in the midst of all of this experience that you're having, all of it, both objective and subjective, he says, be one with it, meaning do not grasp. Do not try to cling. Do not avoid. Do not recall. Simply recognize it as an expression and a manifestation and a modification of your own consciousness. Seeing that that is so, simply rest in the wisdom of one's rikpa. What I have called finding your seat, right here in the midst of your experience, and sitting down in that seat, and resting, and allowing your experience to be. To give up this whole effort of trying to edit your experience. Are you following me? You're trying to edit your experience. That is the fundamental impulse that underlies your control. Your desire to control. The desire to control is the desire to edit experience. There's something going on in your experience that you don't want to happen. And you're trying to control, do something to eliminate that aspect of experience. Rather than let it be. Let it be. Let it be. And find your seat in the midst of all of this, and rest in your rikpa. That is unconditional presence. But you're saying that you're putting no conditions on what can arise in the realm of your experience. You're putting no conditions on it. Isn't that freedom? Is that freedom? You are unconditionally present with no conditions. That's a very different place to be, isn't it? Not trying to edit nothing. When anger happens, you let it happen. Because you have already recognized it's insubstantial. It's going to pass. You don't panic. See, when your anger rises, you get all panic. Oh, I gotta do something. Oh, I gotta knock them out. You see, you don't have to do anything necessarily, all right? Let it be. Don't avoid it, right? Because some of you try to avoid your anger because it's a painful experience. Your anger contradicts your image of yourself. You've been trying to pass yourself off as a nice person. Now, you angry as hell. So, now what's going to happen to this nice person identity that you invested so many years in constructing? That's going to go out the window, right? So you got to find some kind of way to avoid your anger. Rather than letting it be. Oneness, then, beloved, is this unconditional presence. You see, you are simply open and responsive and receptive to everything that is arising within the context of your personal experience, or what we have called your karma. You accept your karma. And a lot of us simply do not want to accept our karma. Not wanting to accept our karma, we become involved in all kinds of defense mechanisms, all kinds of postures, all kinds of strategies, all kinds of contractions, which doesn't change the reality at all, does it? It limits you. It closes you down. It contracts you. Makes you smaller, causes you to separate from your experience. And isn't that the impulse? When something is happening in the realm of your personal experience that you don't like, you want to separate yourself from it, don't you? If that experience is in the form of a person, you want to separate from that person. If it's in a kind of circumstantial situation, you want to separate from that circumstantial situation or whatever. That is the egoic impulse, is to try to separate from one's own experience. How will you do that? Without making yourself insane. It's not possible. So that is the oneness, beloved. Not grasping, not clinging, not avoiding, not rejecting, not identifying it with anything. Being open, being present, not running. Unconditionally present with your own experience. Recognizing it. What the Chava mystics have called pratyabhijana. Were you here when we talked about the pratyabhijana karika? Of the Chava school? You see Bilal. If it didn't burn up. All you rascals, because you got about 200 calls. Is there any taste left, Bilal? Bilal, is the taste, not as your kids are living, is the taste there. I did the same thing. Bilal, is the taste there. Right? Get more kids, can't get more taste. So you see Bilal, beloved, for the talks on the Pratyabhijana schools. It's about recognizing everything that is arising within the manifest universe of your personal experience as being nothing but a modification of your own consciousness. It is you. Tat Twamasi. Thou art that. And when you recognize it, then you'll, you see. Now, when we begin to look into the psychology of enlightenment, we will look at how this very initial dualism and splitting of the one into the subject and object, into the self and other, begins our road towards suffering. And it is the mind that splits. Well, it doesn't really split. It creates the illusion of the one being the many. As we reverse the process and transcend the mind, then we recover the experience of our oneness. So you cannot have the experience of the oneness at the level of your mind, at the level of your thinking. And that's what we all are trying to do. We're trying to somehow have the experience of oneness, but you're not in a location or a place where you can have the experience of oneness. You're in your mind. And by definition, as long as your attention is limited to just your mind and your thinking, then you cannot have the experience of oneness. You're not in the place where that experience is available. If you want the experience of oneness, you must go to where that experience is located, and that is above the thinking process. There's no way to bring that experience down into the thinking process at all. That is the whole point and purpose of meditation. That's why we practice. It's to rise above that. And the masters have given us the means, you see. By catching that Shabbat that we talks about so much here. Riding it. That spanda. We can relocate our attention to that place by where you will have the experience of the oneness of your own being and come to the realization, Aham Brahmasi, Analhak, Anukasa, that you are God. That's what God realization means, doesn't it? It means to realize that you are God. Not to realize Bhagwan is God. What good is that's not God realization. You know what I mean? It's to realize you are God. That's God realization. And that's what it's all about. And you're not less God because you do not realize it at this moment. Right? Your failure to recognize yourself as God does not make you less God at all. So the ontological reality of your divinity is not ever in jeopardy. God is already and always the case for all of us. Last question, yes. Then we'll get out of this sun.
Two things.
Yes, beloved.
This editing that you mentioned, is that predicated out of your response? And second, is there any experience that intelligently looked at you should be separated from? I mean, is there experiences that you
should avoid?
Right. Basically, yes.
Kunsa asked the right questions. See, Kunsa bring us down to earth. Because I understand exactly what you're saying. I don't know if I'm going to be able to really answer you fully. I'm hoping, Bhakti Maji, you heard this question, and Gurudas is here now, so you'll all find ways to address these issues. You see, beloved, is this. It is this very issue that you raise that is the crux of the whole problem. Because we divide our experience into good and bad. Now, what is the reference basis for doing that? What is the reference point for such a division of our experience into good or bad? Well, that reference point is egoism. Right? And then the moment it does that, now it's created conflict within its own psyche. Right? Because now it must be committed to the pursuit of that which is good and what? The avoidance of that which is bad. And that sets up a dynamic in the psyche. Tension, stress is happening now. Already one has lost comfort. Already the inner war with the world has begun. once that division is made, now one's become mightily involved in the strategies for winning such a war. And the question becomes, is there such a way to win in that battle? What should be avoided? Well, beloved, according to Tantra and according to many of these schools, nothing is to be avoided. Ultimately. But that's an absolute answer. Right? So we don't want to make the absolute error. We don't want to make the pre-trans fallacy, as I call it. The question is, what that arises within your experience should be avoided? The absolute answer that the mystics give is nothing, because nothing can be avoided. It's like avoiding yourself. How will you do that? But when we said, well, Bhagwan, I shouldn't avoid it, does that mean I should indulge it? Not necessarily. It simply means do not avoid it. Greet it, meet it, recognize it, understand it. Non-avoidance means to understand it. And out of that understanding, you will respond to it appropriately. So we mustn't presume that when the mystics say don't try to avoid anything, they're saying indulge. That's not what they're saying. They're saying see everything open, intelligently, and then respond appropriately. But it's really, Kun says, you put it very beautifully, it's really about this trying to avoid that which we don't like. That's what most of us are really having trouble. What do we do with those parts of our experience that are happening that we don't like? Because guess what? They're happening in spite of you not liking it. Have you noticed yet? I mean, have it finally dawned on you that there's no correlation between your march and God's march, God's will, right? That in spite of you not wanting things to happen that you don't like, they keep happening anyway? You have to learn how to relate to it ultimately, beloved, not on the basis of your likes or dislikes at all. To simply be open to it. To accept it as being a part of your experience and understand it. And be grown by that understanding. The Chavai mystics used to shock people because they would go to a graveyard and pick up a piece of human flesh and bite into it just to make the point. People would, you know, I mean, you can imagine how gross that must be to bite into a thigh bone of a human being, you know, swallow it all down, chase it down with a little wine. In India, you can understand all of that is blasphemous, isn't it? And then people will react like that and they say, well, what is the point? You know, there's no fundamental difference between this and that apple. But we mustn't make the fallacy of confusing absolute truth with relative truth. There's a vast difference. Now, the absolute truth, for instance, that the death of any one of you in here is meaningless. That's the absolute truth. That your life, your living, is absolutely meaningless. If you drop off the planet, it wouldn't make one bit of difference at all. In the large scope of things, there is no death, in fact. The absolute truth is that nothing dies. Change forms, but no death, right? Now that's the absolute truth. The relative truth is that when your husband died, you're going to have some grief, isn't it? The absolute truth is that you should not avoid anything. The relative truth is that you must be discriminated. And that's the relative truth. You must develop Afrika. You must discriminate. You must find out which aspects of your experience you can make self-liberation out of, and which aspects of your experience only reinforces your suffering. You must discriminate. But ultimately, your discriminating makes no difference. So, Guru Murti, your task will be to unpack all of that for you. He's my in-house metaphysician. He does an excellent job. There's nothing else to let us enjoy the food that you all have bought today. And we have prasad and so forth and so on. And you're most welcome to file by. There will be prasad.
Where were you at?
My oil light came. I was almost out of oil.
Well,
I had to go back home.
you gotta take better care of that truck.
Is this the first time it had come out?
When the last time the oil was
It's within the
within
I
the-
take care of that. Yeah. I had an engine to burn out.
Yeah. My little barbecue. It's coming.